What's going on, Lions fans? Welcome to the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel. I'm Miko, joined by my guy Morgan Cannon here, and this is your go-to place for all things Lions related. We're talking news, updates, analysis, and so much more. Today, Morgan, we get to do something that honestly, people might think it's weird for me to say this. I don't think breaking down blowouts is the most fun. It becomes very, very one-sided, where it's like, hey, they did amazing things and the other team didn't do good things, but it's still always good to talk about a Lions win when you get one of those, right?
Yeah, that was an odd game to like. It was a lot of fun. Don't get me wrong, and a win is a win. I'm glad to be 6-1 and stacking wins as we get into the middle of the season here. But it was strange, man. Like I feel like the crowd kind of knew like Tennessee wasn't really going to be able to hang, even when it was 14-14, and they're like, there goes my light. That's okay. Need to extend that battery. But yeah, like it was fun to watch, fun to be a part of. But from an analytical and like writing and like content standpoint, it becomes a little difficult because you're like, what are we going to break down here? Like you got some kick returns to break down, Jameer not getting touched. But yeah, there's some things to talk about for sure still.
Yeah, and listen, for those of you that are watching, we are going to be a little more critical, unfortunately, because I think even in a win this dominant, and Morgan and I talked about it when we did our film study of the Titans, like we thought the Lions would run away with this. We both, I think, picked scores that were pretty like one-sided for this game. And so it's not a surprise. Like, I mean, neither of us picked 50 points. Like nobody saw that. Doesn't usually happen in the but was exactly played out the way I thought it would in terms of it being a very one-sided game. But there were still some things that happened in this game that I don't think either of us really expected on both the offensive and defensive side. But before we get to those 2 points, Morgan, let me just start out by asking this. Even though it was a blowout, did you at least have one big takeaway from this win?
Yeah, and it's just that this coaching staff is elite, man. Like I know we've known that for a while now. I want to say, probably since like the end of 2022, if we're being honest. But the Titans aren't a good team right now. If we're just keeping it a buck, right? Like they're just not good. They got a lot of problems, and they're probably gonna be hitting reset on some things here pretty soon, depending on how some stuff shakes out. So, but we talked like this could be a trap game, this and that. And then eventually, like, it did not become a trap game, man. Dan Campbell had them boys ready to play. Like, they hung around for a little bit. And, like, don't get it twisted, too. I want to make sure, like, the Titans have played, like, periods of good football, right? Like, they were up 10-0 against the Bills before.
Yep.
They allowed 34 straight points. Like, they were going toe-to-toe with the Bears in week 1 until they're up, like, 17-0 until they allowed the Bears to come back. So, really, like, turnovers have killed them for a while now, like, as it did. And then poor special teams play. But yeah, it's a bad team, but to pummel them the way the Lions did on Sunday is a sign of like, this is what elite teams do to bad teams. Like, yeah, hey, sorry, this is going to be really ugly and not fun for you, but this is what we got to take care of business because it's we take it week by week. And I'm sure that was Campbell's messaging all week. So good to see them take care of a bad team. Do it rather emphatically, right? Like, all 3 phases took care of business. And yeah, it was fun. That's my big takeaway. What about you?
I'm actually going to piggyback off of that because I think that is like last week, I want to say it was, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago when they blew out the Cowboys. We kind of planted that flag that like, hey, this might be the best team in the NFL, right? Like, and I actually, it was last week because it was when they moved to 5-1. And even though Kansas City is still undefeated, it was like, I still had that feeling like, no, this is like the best team in the NFL. And I think this week they doubled down on that. But to your point, it's because you can look at the coaching staff, right? Like how many teams start trending the right way and they drop a game like this because they're not prepared, right? Because the coaching staff is letting their players, kind of feel themselves a little too much, and maybe they're taking too much time off in practice. So they're going a little bit easy on themselves. And Dan talked about that in the offseason. Like, when you have a good team like this, the biggest test is knowing to not take your foot off the gas because you have to continue to have that hunger. And so, again, 8 weeks into the season, the Lions look like they have that same hunger every single week. And that is a testament to the coaching staff, starting at Dan and being able to set that tone and be able to come up with the game plans. But also looking at, like, I want to give a special shout out to Aaron Glenn because that first quarter when Calvin Ridley was going crazy, I was ready to like literally fasten my seatbelt because I was just like, this is going to be a long day for the secondary if the first quarter, if every other quarter looks like the first quarter. And credit to AG for getting his defense together, getting his secondary together, and making the proper adjustments because from the first quarter on, I don't think Calvin Ridley like really tacked on that many more yards after that. Obviously, he had the fumble and things like that, but they found a way of like, okay, we have to find a way of limiting number zero in the passing game. And so that, to your point, is a credit to the coaching staff, never getting too high on themselves, never thinking like, oh no, because the offense will carry us or the special teams will carry us. Like, no, still coaching your unit and still getting the best out of them. Again, in a game where your offense didn't get that many opportunities. Of course, when they did, they popped off. But no, I'm right there with you. This coaching staff is proving just that this team being one of the best teams or the best team in the NFL, like this coaching staff is one of the, if not the number one reason why that's the case.
Yeah, no doubt. And like, excuse me, like you said, that just took care of business. Did what you needed to do. The Titans made it easy at times. But yeah, it was a beautiful thing. You just stack the wins. That's what needs to happen because you're going to need these come December, hopefully in January when seeding starts coming into play. But yeah, happy to see it. And they got out mostly healthy, which was nice. I think Rodrigo avoided a high ankle sprain from what I saw.
Yeah. News came out today that it seems like he just aggravated a previous ankle injury, an old ankle injury, not even like necessarily previous to like a previous game, but just something that probably he had sustained at some other point in his career, but nothing that's serious. I think they're saying that he'll probably miss this week, but he should be back in week 10 for the Texans game. So that's like you said, that's good news to hear. But
and yeah, like to your point, Rudolph was dropping some dots, man. I will say too, early on there, Ridley was getting open. The coverage wasn't bad, most reps, especially when you're watching it live. I'm like, wow, he's throwing some good balls. But then in the back of my head, I'm like, this is why Mason Rudolph isn't a starting quarterback in this league. Like he'll have some okay passes, and then he'll have some passes where Kirby Joseph just baited the man into throwing a dumb pass and took it back. So it was just a matter of time, which was nice to feel. It was a good feeling.
Yeah. With that being said, I'll pivot to one of the other questions. This wasn't actually the second question we were going to have, but since we're talking about Mason Rudolph and we're talking about just how accurate he was, I will ask this question because one thing that did stand out to me, again, even in a blowout, and it's primarily like those first two quarters, really, I did see the Lions kind of struggle to create that pressure that we were accustomed to seeing. Wow, that one really tripped me up. Accustomed to seeing the first few weeks in the season, like that was not really happening against the Titans. And I think this now for me is at least back-to-back weeks. We saw it with Sam Darnold. He got off to like a really hot start and was able to complete a number of passes. And then you do that with Mason Rudolph. There's a little bit of concern on my part, Morgan. And so I'm going to ask you, because obviously it's going to be a talking point probably for the rest of this week until the Lions make a move. But do you think they're at the point where they need to make a trade for a pass rusher?
It's tough to say they need to because they keep on winning games pretty emphatically. Like, they beat the Vikings, who are supposedly one of the best teams in football last week on the road in a tough environment. They've had a couple blowouts. But at the end of the day, you're not thinking about right now here in October. You're trying to think about what's it gonna look like in January and so on. So I would like them to add somebody. I know everyone's clamoring for Darius Smith. I think that's a very realistic target in terms of like where Brad Holmes is going to be swinging. Like I think most of the fan base at now is past the Max Crosby and Myles Garrett fever dream, so we can let those go on and pass through the night.
Yep.
But adding Darius Smith, at least a couple, like a body, possibly two, just because you're rolling guys out there that, like Muhammad had some production yesterday. I'm watching the tape tonight, so I watched a little bit of it. He was productive. I noticed Aleem a couple of times. Mekhi Wingo popped for me a couple times when I was watching it the first time. So there's players there, but if we're looking at, helping out that relationship between the rush and coverage, I do think you want to, and Darius Smith, in my opinion, is a perfect fit for this defense because he's going to set an edge. He's going to be a 3-down defender, and then he's going to be a veteran that you can trust to win some quick one-on-ones off the edge, on obvious passing downs. And that's what the Lions need right now, to your point.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I got to after watching that game is that like this is becoming more and more of a need. Like you said, it's hard to say that when they are continuing to win and you blow out the Titans, you blow out the Cowboys, you have a really hard fought game against the Vikings. But even you and I came on last week and we were like, hey, the defense actually looked pretty good without Aiden. But it's the little nuances that you start to look at and you're like, man, but these quarterbacks are completing a high percentage of their passes. And it is, like you said, it's not necessarily for October. It is when you start looking ahead. But even just looking to next week, you have Green Bay and you have Houston after that. You have Jacksonville after that. All three of those teams tout like very high level quarterback play with Jordan, possibly Jordan Love, DJ Stroud. And regardless of what some people think about Trevor Lawrence, like when Trevor Lawrence is on, he can be one of those guys. And so it's those are quarterbacks that you don't want to have like cozy pockets for. You want to be able to find some level of disruption. And I credit Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell for, having homegrown talent, for being able to find these diamonds in the rough every so often. But yeah, it does feel like the Lions probably need to make us, not probably, they need to make a swing. They need to go out and get, whether it's the Darius Smith. I heard someone bring up Chase Young just because he has like a pretty like cap friendly contract. And it's just like, hey, like it's cheap. It's, 1 year rental type of thing. You don't necessarily have to sign him for the long haul. Like I'm pro just about anybody because I don't think you're going to find the production that you're looking for on someone's practice squad or just kind of sitting on their couch right now. Right. And so I do think you kind of have to, if that means parting with a day 2 or day 3 draft pick, like do that because I think that window can still be open. I know there's a lot of people that are concerned about like, well, if you start trading away day 2 picks, are you going to be shrinking the Lions' window for competing for a Super Bowl? Right now, it's wide open. And as good as they're looking right now, you would hate for that window to close off of something like this where you're just not getting to the quarterback because your number one pass rusher is shelved until possibly you make it to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and I'm good with making a move if it's if it's a good fit. Brad Holmes thinks it's a good fit. Chase Young, I don't know. I think there's still some obviously untapped potential there. It hasn't really worked out since he's become a pro, but when you watch him on film, he's not always the most active against the run and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure he's going to be a Brad Holmes or a Dan Campbell kind of guy. But yeah, I'm with you. I do think they need to bring somebody in. I don't know if you saw Dan Campbell's presser today, but it certainly seems like something's coming. He did like a little jump and is messing around, and he's just funny.
I was gonna say, I'm getting to the point. I don't know if Dan's just messing with us or if he's like, no, like guys, like it's something that's going to be like actually pretty exciting. So
that's what I'm hoping, the latter.
Yeah, but I think we're both in agreement that like it's definitely time. Obviously, the trade deadline ends this week, right? Like it's the last week that you can make next week. Okay,
yeah,
so they got
Tuesday
a couple weeks.
Next week. Yeah.
Okay, so they got a little bit of time to be able to make a trade. But yeah, I think especially going into Green Bay, if you can get a Darius Smith, like that would be a good get going into Green Bay, because that's going to be another really big game. With that said, going over back to the offensive side of the football, like we said, the offense didn't quite get to do and be the offense that we've been accustomed to seeing the last few weeks, mainly because special teams and Khalif Raymond were basically taking back touchdowns left and right. But I will say, Morgan, and again, this is being a little critical, right? You have 164 yards rushing. Jameer looked amazing. David Montgomery looked awesome when he got his opportunities. They were 5 for 5 in the red zone. Everything. All that's great. But Taylor Decker looked like he was having a rough day. And I can't think of too many games in recent memory where he's had that bad of a game. The only other game that comes to mind is Green Bay last year when they lost to Green Bay in Detroit. Yeah, the second game against Green Bay, and Taylor looked kind of rough there. He had a rough outing against Rashawn Gary. But this was probably worse than that. Like, Arden Key is a good pass rusher. I would not have pegged him to be getting Taylor Decker the way he was.
Yeah, it was the first rep of the game. He got him bad. Decker opened up his shoulder, crossed his feet, and it just was an ugly rep for the veteran. And per PFF, he got sacked. He got tagged with a sack, a hurry, and 2 pressures on the day. But the reason that shows up so much is because the Lions didn't have that many offensive snaps, right? So it's sticking out in our mind a little bit more. Long-term concerns, I don't really have any, like, he's, in terms of overall, like, watching him on tape, maybe he's taken a step back so far this year, and when you watch him, but, we'll see. He could still get it back up to previous levels of play. I'd put it like at a 4 or a 5. There are ways to help out an edge rusher or a pass protector working against an edge rusher, as you know. And I do think we're just so spoiled now with offensive line play, because we look at the likes of Frank Ragnow and Penei Sewell, and, we're like, well, you should be closer to perfect. But at the end of the day, Decker's always been a, like, pretty good, sometimes really good left tackle. And those days he's only pretty good, he can get got. So at the end of the day, I'm not too worried about it. But what about you?
Oh, I'm right there with you. I'm not concerned at all, because I do think this, like you said, this tends to happen every so often with Taylor. Like, he has these moments where I've always looked at him as like a good left tackle, right? Like, not great, but he's definitely like top 15 at his position, in my opinion. So, but every once in a while, he has a matchup like he did yesterday against Arden Key, or like I said, last year against Rashawn Gary, where he just is having a bad day. But I can always say, to Decker's credit, he always bounces back very, very well. And when the lights are at its brightest is usually when he plays his best. So again, they'll play against Green Bay this upcoming week. I'll be definitely focused on, like, again, how does he attack that Rashawn Gary matchup? But tackle play is very similar to me than to corner play. And where I feel like you can have a very good corner, but just they get the wrong matchup on a certain day, and they just don't look as sound as you're used to them seeing. Obviously, like, the elite corners are locked in at all times, but you could have a good corner and it's just like, man, like, what happened on this given day? And it's just like, hey, bro, that was just the matchup.
Yeah. Darius Slay is a good comp for Taylor Decker almost. It's like a very good at his position, but depending on the matchup and Darius Slay has been getting cooked a couple times this year so far, but he's also getting up there in age, so just father time comes for us all, but especially football season players, excuse me.
Yeah, no, and I'm right there with you. I remember former left tackle for the Tennessee Titans, ironically, Taylor Lewan, said this once on Bussin' with the Boys, where he, I think he was breaking down one of his worst days, and I believe it was against, I want to say it was Khalil Mack, and he was just like, bro, I just didn't have it. He was like, he got me on the first one. He's like, and I never recovered. And so, like, there's parts of me that just, like, that come to mind when I think about Taylor Decker yesterday, where it's just like, maybe that first one shook him so bad that it was just like every rep after that he was overcompensating.
Definitely. It can happen, almost like a pitcher or anything else in sports, or like a shooter in basketball. You airball that first one, you miss really bad, you can get in your head, even if you're a pro and you've been at it since 2016, like Decker has, right? So overall, like you said, I think I'm with you. I'm not overly concerned. I think he'll get it back on track, but it's something to monitor as we, move forward here in the next couple of years, because the Lions gave him that extension, right, prior to the season, give him a little more guaranteed money, take care of him. Ultimately, I hope he finishes his pro playing days as a Lion, and we can move on from there. But I think we got a little bit, so I still have faith in Decker for sure.
I was going to say, same here. I think we're still a good few years away from that. Again, unless, they win a Super Bowl, then I think Taylor's one of those guys. He may get his Super Bowl and be like, all right, I'm out.
Very well could, and I wouldn't blame him. He's had a long career, very successful career. So if he got that ring and was like, I'm going to go chill with my babies, I think his wife's pregnant with their second baby, so I wouldn't blame him at all, for sure.
Not even a little bit. But that's pretty much going to do it for this video, guys. Like I said, it's a blowout win. There's not a ton to really break down. This team played well. They played a complete game. A couple hiccups here and there, on the offense and defensive end, but this is what a good team looks like. I love Dan's post-game locker room speech, where he was like, this is what champions do. And like you kind of said it as well, Morgan, like, you go in there, you beat teams. It doesn't matter the day. It doesn't matter the circumstances. It doesn't matter who you have available and who they don't have available. You go out there and you show up. And so it's good to have a team that's 6-1. They are definitely trending in the right direction. Every win that they stack up, I'm digging my heels in more and more that this is the best team in football. I don't care what the Chiefs' record is. This is the best team that I've seen play football for all season. And they get another great test this week against Green Bay. You and I are going to sit here and break down the tape. We're going to probably discuss which aspect of this team we want to look at, whether it's the offense or defense. Do we do a blend of the two? We'll see. But definitely stay tuned to the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel. You can do that by simply hitting the subscribe button and hitting that notification bell. That'll keep you locked into everything that we're doing over here on YouTube. And if you want to keep locked in into everything that's being written, you can always go over to the prideofdetroit.com website and check out all the latest articles that have been uploaded over there, whether it's analysis, whether it's news. Morgan occasionally writes, some, highlights a couple players or things that have happened in the most recent game. So you can always check that stuff out as well. But yeah, we appreciate you guys taking the time to hang out with us, and we will definitely be seeing you guys in the next video.